Hello, everyone, and welcome back to FZ Architecture. Today, we are looking at one of the most unexpected and influential projects in contemporary architecture, 1111 Lincoln Road in Miami Beach, designed by Herzog de Meuron and developed as part of a broader mixed-use urban redevelopment at the western end of Lincoln Road. What makes this project so interesting is that it takes one of the most ordinary building types, the parking garage, and transforms it into a civic, spatial, and architectural event. Let's dive in. Yachts. This is not just a place to park cars. It is a project that mixes parking, retail, restaurants, event space, and residential uses, while also acting as a kind of urban gateway to one of the most active pedestrian areas in Miami Beach. So in this video, we will look at the project from four perspectives: its urban context, its architectural idea, its spatial and structural design, and finally why this building became such an important reference in contemporary architecture. The architects take the parking garage, which is usually hidden, repetitive, and purely functional, and instead make it open, exposed, monumental, and flexible. The building is basically a fully open concrete structure, and its identity comes from the way slabs, ramps, columns, voids, and circulation are composed almost like an urban stage set. One of the most cited aspects of the project is that the ceiling heights vary dramatically. Some levels have standard parking height, while others are double or even triple height. This is not just a formal game. It allows the structure to host different uses beyond parking, both permanent and temporary. That is why the building can function not only as infrastructure, but also as a place for retail, events, fashion shows, photography, and public occupation. This is where the project becomes genuinely intelligent. The building does not deny its function, but it refuses to be limited by it. One of the most important things to understand about 1111 Lincoln Road is its urban implantation within Miami Beach. The project is located at the western end of Lincoln Road, right at the intersection with Alton Road in one of the most active pedestrian and commercial areas of the city. This position is very strategic because Lincoln Road works as a major public promenade, while Alton Road brings a stronger vehicular condition. In other words, the building sits exactly where pedestrian life and car circulation meet. From an urban point of view, the building does not behave like an isolated object. It acts as a gateway to Lincoln Road Mall and helps mark the transition between the more intense car-oriented edge of the city and the pedestrian character of the shopping street. That is why its position is so important. The project is not only solving a parking program, it is also organizing a piece of the city. If we look at the site plan, we can explain that the intervention actually works across several parcels, combining the new parking structure with the transformation of the former SunTrust building, plus additional frontage toward Alton Road. This means the implantation is not just a single volume placed on a corner, but a broader urban operation that restructures the edge of the block. When showing the location plan, it is useful to highlight three things. First, the relationship with Lincoln Road as a pedestrian spine. Second, the connection to Alton Road as an access corridor for vehicles. And third, the condition of the project as a terminal urban landmark at the west end of the district. Those three layers help explain why Herzog de Meuron approached the project as both infrastructure and public architecture. The circulation diagrams are especially important here. Car circulation is integrated naturally into the building because this is, at its core, a parking structure. But unlike a conventional garage, pedestrian movement is also treated as a central architectural experience. The project includes an open sculptural stair and a sequence of elevated platforms that turn movement through the building into a visual and spatial journey, with views toward the city and Lincoln Road. What is the main architectural idea here? The architects take the parking garage, which is usually hidden, repetitive, and purely functional, and instead make it open, exposed, monumental, and flexible. The building is basically a fully open concrete structure, and its identity comes from the way slabs, ramps, columns, voids, and circulation are composed almost like an urban stage set. One of the most cited aspects of the project is that the ceiling heights vary dramatically. Some levels have standard parking height, while others are double or even triple height. This is not just a formal game. It allows the structure to host different uses beyond parking, both permanent and temporary. That is why the building can function not only as infrastructure, but also as a place for retail, events, fashion shows, photography, and public occupation. This is where the project becomes genuinely intelligent. The building does not deny its function, but it refuses to be limited by it. Now let's talk about form and structure because this is really where the project becomes unforgettable. The building is composed as a family of concrete slabs, columns, and ramps. But instead of using a regular structural grid, Herzog de Meuron created a composition of irregular supports and shifting floor plates. The result is a building that feels both heavy and strangely light at the same time. It has mass but also openness. It has repetition but never monotony. Visually, the structure can look almost unstable, although of course it is carefully engineered. This sensation is part of the architectural effect. The columns are not only structural elements, they also produce shadow, rhythm, and visual tension on the facade. Archdaily noted how these raw structural elements recall a reinterpretation of tropical modernism, with exposed structure generating shade and spatial character. And this is especially appropriate in Miami. The building is open to air, light, views, and breeze. It does not behave like a sealed object. It works more like a porous platform system adapted to climate, urban life, and changing occupation. That openness is one of the project's greatest strengths. If we think about this project through drawings, the section is probably more important than the plan. In plan, the building organizes parking, ramps, retail, and circulation in a relatively clear way. But in section, the project becomes much more complex and much more interesting. The changing floor-to-floor heights generate a stacked sequence of spatial experiences rather than a simple repetitive parking system. Each level feels slightly different, and that variation creates a sense of movement through the building. Another key element is the central sculptural stair, which the project description presents as an unenclosed vertical circulation element that turns movement through the garage into a panoramic and ceremonial experience. That phrase is very revealing. In most parking structures, circulation is minimized and treated as a technical necessity. Here, circulation becomes architecture. So, whether you move through the building by car or on foot, the project is constantly framing views, revealing depth, and changing your perception of the city around it. This is why the building has attracted not only drivers, but also runners, tourists, photographers, and people who simply go there to experience the space. One of the most radical decisions in the project is its mixed-use program. The development includes parking at its core, but it also incorporates retail at street level. Additional commercial space, restaurants, and upper-level residential use. Published project descriptions mention around 300 parking spaces, ground-level shops and restaurants, and a private residence integrated into the upper part of the structure. This mixture is essential because it prevents the building from becoming dead infrastructure. Instead, it operates continuously and at different speeds. At one moment, it is a parking building. At another, it is a shopping destination. At another, it becomes an event platform with some of the best views in Miami Beach. From an urban design perspective, that is a very valuable lesson. When a typically inactive building type is hybridized with public and commercial uses, it can begin to participate in city life instead of interrupting it. Another aspect that deserves attention is the relationship between the new structure and the pre-existing building. The lowest floor plate of the new parking structure cuts into part of the ground floor of the existing building, helping create a new glazed retail frontage along Lincoln Road. The rehabilitation also introduced new access and a stair leading toward upper-level uses, including a rooftop restaurant with broad views of Miami Beach and the ocean. This is a very strategic move. Rather than treating the older structure as a problem, the project absorbs it into a new urban composition. So the architecture is not only about the iconic garage image that everyone photographs. It is also about how new and old structures are edited together to reactivate the block. Materially, the project is remarkably direct. The dominant material is concrete, and it is left exposed in a very honest way. There is no attempt to beautify the structure with unnecessary cladding. The architecture depends on proportion, void, shadow, depth, and the precision of structural composition. This gives the building a raw character but not a crude one. The project feels deliberate and highly controlled. The large floor plates create deep shade, the open edges frame the sky and the city, and the irregular supports make the spaces feel dramatic, even though the palette is minimal. In many ways, this is an architecture of spatial intensity through very few elements. For architecture students, this is one of the most valuable lessons in the project. You do not always need complex materials or expressive facades to create a memorable building. Sometimes structure, proportion, and section are enough. So why did 1111 Lincoln Road become so influential? Because it redefines what architecture can do with an ordinary program. It shows that even a parking garage can become a piece of civic infrastructure, urban theater, and spatial experimentation. It also demonstrates Herzog de Meuron's ability to work between disciplines: architecture, urbanism, landscape, infrastructure, commerce, and image. At the same time, the project can also be read critically. Its spectacular character helped turn it into a destination, and that visibility is part of its success. But it also raises questions that are still relevant today. Can architecture elevate a car-based typology without also celebrating car dependency? Can a project be both public and exclusive when some of its uses are luxury retail, private residence, and curated event space? These questions do not weaken the project. In fact, they make it more interesting. Great architecture often operates in tension, and 1111 Lincoln Road is full of those tensions: infrastructure and monument, utility and spectacle, openness and exclusivity, permanence and change. To conclude, 1111 Lincoln Road is much more than an iconic parking garage. It is a project about urban activation, sectional invention, programmatic hybridization, and the transformation of a banal typology into architecture with real public presence. By opening the structure, varying the heights, mixing uses, and treating circulation as an experience, Herzog and de Meuron created a building that changed how many architects think about parking, mixed-use design, and the possibilities of infrastructure. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of the project. Architecture is not only about designing prestigious cultural buildings or private houses. It is also about taking the most ordinary parts of the city and giving them intelligence, dignity, and new life. Thank you for watching FZ Architecture. If you enjoyed this analysis, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.